guys, so as some of you will know, I collaborate amongst others with TM25 and Mera25 Italy, but this is my personal channel and I would love to share some thoughts with you in a more chill, chatty way. And I just feel like YouTube would be a better place for me to do that because it makes me far more relaxed than Instagram does. And so here we are. Today I want to share how I actually grew up on a ship, on a literal ship. And I do want to link this to my most definitely political thoughts about it, but I am gonna tell you guys about what the experience was like in the first place. So if you enjoy the gossip of it, please stay because that's what I'm gonna go on to now. But if you want to know my political view on it, please stay until the end, or I will find a way to let you know where you can go in the video to check that out. So how does growing up on a ship actually looks like? So first of all, why did that happen to me? So this was a choice. This was my dad's choice basically, because it was connected to his job at the time, and the choice was to take our entire family with him to live on the boat. And so what kind of boat, right? So basically these were cruise ships, so the really big kind of generic ships that you would think of when you think like you're in a touristic city and like there's a huge port, and these are the boats that you see that are usually, you know, the biggest ones, but they're not the cargo ones, they're the ones for passengers. And as most of you will know, basically this is, you know, it's become a very mass tourism sort of industry, and you know, a lot of people are on board. They're mostly there for, I don't know nowadays, but like it used to be definitely like around a week, depending on the itinerary. It would be like sometimes longer, like 10 days, sometimes shorter cruises. It really depends on the company, the place. I'm not a huge expert in terms of the industry. But basically for me, it would have been, yes, cruise ships. That's the type of ship that I would be in. And the cruise itself, so the group of people would be there for a week, right? So they get on, 7 days later, the entirety of the passengers, and amongst them the children that I would have spent my time with, they would have left. So I would have known them for a week and then turnover. So basically the only people who were in my life in a more permanent way were the staff, right? So adults, fundamentally. And this was like most of my life for the first few years of my life. Now I don't know exactly how many. It like gradually decreased, but basically up until I was like 5, this was like the majority of the year for me. So the most of my time I would spend here, and the rest of the time I would mostly be in the Canary Islands, where I wasn't from at all. Like literally my parents moved there when they knew absolutely no one. And so it was basically going from isolation to even more total isolation, literally. And yeah, basically that's another part of my life that's even darker, I think, because knowing absolutely no one doesn't make for a great life, in my personal opinion. But basically, I want to tell you guys about how living in the actual ship actually was. So, how would a day look like in my case for months on end? So, first of all, those few years, it was most of my time. Then, from 5 until I turned around 10, it was like it would be like half the year in the end, because it would be like 3 months around Christmas time, and then some months or at least some weeks in the summer time. And then from when I was 10, we did go, but it was definitely like drastically reduced because, I mean, someone had to study, right? You would think. And so that's what I did. And basically, I um I spent like my childhood, half of it, like I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say it was my entire childhood, but half of it was on board. And so how did a day look like? So basically I, you know, lived in a cabin, and this wouldn't be like a living room. This would be like a room, okay? And it would be me, my parents and my sister basically sharing that, and just, yeah, basically living together in one room, with the one bathroom. And I remember, like, in practical terms, yes, you are listening to an engine 24/7, and it like slightly shaked a little. And then you had your like little window overlooking like the ocean, obviously. And then the big bed, and like I honestly don't remember where they put us, but it would have been probably like either a sofa bed or like tiny beds, right? Like for children. And then for a while, when I was like very, very young, as far as I know, they would bring us food from the restaurant. Sometimes they would bring it to the cabin. So the cabin would have like a little table or something, and we would just, eat there at that table. And after that, we mostly went to the restaurant. So basically every single day it would be either restaurant, like breakfast, lunch and dinner at a restaurant, or like a how do they call it in English, like the other type of the self-service kind of place where you go, you pick up the food, and like it's still basically like a restaurant, just like a buffet type thing. But basically that would be it. So that would be the most practical terms. Then the added part, of course, was when we weren't like at sea. So basically you just like sail from one port to the next. Basically you get somewhere and you stay there for a day. That's like the normal. And you stay there for a day in like the given port, the given, station. And you go down for like a few hours, and like you maybe have lunch there. And then you go back to the ship at the end of the day, and like you sleep in your cabin. And for me personally, where I spent like most of my time was Brazil. That was like the overwhelmingly the majority of the time, that's where we were. And it was mostly like along like Bahia, Rio, like obviously a bunch of different ports and like spots. It wasn't always the same place. And in terms of that, I mean, it was beautiful and delicious as a place. I think it's very strange when you visit somewhere and you have like basically nothing to do with it. It's just you're there for a day, and then next week you're there for another day, and you know absolutely no one. uh, you're just experiencing it without actually being involved or engaged whatsoever with the locals. And yeah, you're basically a constant perennial stranger and, tourist pretty much. And so yeah, this was mostly where I was. And I mean, I pretty much went everywhere, to be honest. Like, I'm so done with traveling. Northern Europe, Mediterranean, and a long etc of places. And yeah, so that would be part of the day sometimes. Like when we were at the port, which was like most of the time, I would say, then you go down, take a like yeah, take a walk, visit wherever, go to lunch, and then you're back. And so on the boat, basically, if this wasn't a part of the day, so if we were at sea, it would literally just be like eat, 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 like at the restaurant, and then at night you go and you watch a show, which was basically a mix between, like, think circus slash Moulin Rouge in Paris. So circus, but like ballerinas and like variety show kind of thing. And that was every single night. And then I don't know, like maybe I would go to like the cabin and we would watch like a cartoon or something as I went to sleep. And basically that was it. Like, in terms of friendships, if you're wondering, no, there are none. And I'm talking zero. I'm talking like by the time I was 10, apart from the little contact I managed to make on land when I went to my actual school, which obviously was quite complicated because you're there for like not the full year, like not the full school year, and it just becomes quite difficult to like make any sort of relationships, especially when you're not from that region in Spain, um, which is basically Latin America when you come from like Madrid, which not very compatible, I have to say, but like not in a bad way to either of those. It's just very different objectively. And yeah, so basically the first friendships that I made were these lady who, I don't know how you call them in English, but basically they're like, the people at the like summer swimming pools, or in the resorts that are there to like entertain the public and like do childcare basically for the kids. She would have been like in her late 20s, early 30s, and I remember like this girl, I absolutely loved her. And like, obviously she was my, quote unquote friend, because like she could have been, she could have been my mom. But like, I just absolutely loved her, and like that was like my first friend I ever had. I was like borderline limerent on this person. Like, I loved her because I finally, like, that was like my first experience of like spending time with someone who wasn't not just my family, because I barely saw my family apart from my mom and dad. Like, that was my first experience of a human outside my mom and dad, and I just like went crazy, like in terms of actually bonding with her and like being close to her. Apart from, like literally the only people that I'd bonded that way were like my parents or my grandparents. And by my grandparents, I mean just one side of my family, not even both, because I barely saw anyone. I was traveling all the time. And then after this, I remember like I really loved opera because it was one of the only things shown to me. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch what you would call like trash television. Like, that wasn't a thing in my house, which I have many disagreements over, but like that was just what it was. And so obviously, like, growing up watching opera, I just fucking loved it. Like, it was so interesting to me, and like just reflected my feelings. And like, you know, a lot of these heroines were in a situation of isolation and like being misunderstood, and you know, having a lot of feelings, and that was exactly how I felt. So it really resonated with me. And this soprano that came on board actually taught me to sing. I loved singing. And so I remember her like teaching me, and I remember like this was like would have been like the second time I actually again built a relationship with anyone outside my family. And I remember her being like, the day she left, she gave me like a little letter that was like her initial. She looked at me, like I think in her heart she would have probably been like, this poor little girl, like I'm so sorry, this is your life. Sounds like it sucks, but basically she gave me the little like initial, and she told me like, I'm here. And my pain like just went through the fucking roof. Like I remember like the knot in my throat, like literally just wanting to cry like my soul out. And obviously I stopped myself because I didn't feel like it was safe to do that, and I didn't feel like I just wasn't a good place. But like basically I remember like this fucking broke my heart. Like I loved this lady. Um and so yeah, these were like my only close relationships that I ever managed to build until I was like maybe like 12. So for 12 years that was like two, and that was it. And other than that, what things would you do? I mean, you would participate in like the festivities, quote unquote, they had on board, like carnival stuff in Brazil. Obviously I did like that because I had this princess pink dress that I just was crazy about. I loved it. And then I don't know, you would make like arts and crafts little things. But fundamentally the thing is that was it. Like my thing that I loved was like they let me sing in public, which I loved, and like I just didn't want to leave the stage ever. So that was like another thing that was good for me. And going in the little tiny boats that like take you to the shore when like the big boat can't like get to the shore because it's maybe too small, then they take you in these like tiny boats, and they go quicker, and like you can really like feel the ocean because you're like closer to it. That I loved. But basically that was it. All the rest was isolating, unstable, boring. And the biggest thing for me, I would say, is the total lack of a narrative that would have me connected to anything or anyone else. Like the whole thread actually was being disconnected, and there being like a total lack of a compass, direction, link to either people or places or traditions or nations. I was completely alienated from any of that, also because as a child you don't even know it exists, and like it's not like there was a before. There was never a before. Like it was a completely postmodern existence from day one. um like I had no idea of, you know, politics existing even at all, of like the fact that people have friends. Like I remember friends for me was like, what is that? Like I honestly I didn't understand the concept. I thought it was something some people had. I never imagined that like adults would like have other adults in their life that they chose and that they grew up with. To me it was like, grow up with? What do you mean? I know people for 7 days. um And yeah, like that's basically how it felt. And I'm thinking of more details I can give you guys, but the thing is, basically, unless I went into the details of like every like city we visited, which like again was like once a week for a few hours, and that was it. Then I really I don't know like what else um there could be, because there was nothing else. You know, it was literally like eating and watching a show. Maybe there had been a few hours of that day that I was walking around some city, unless we were at sea, and then there was literally just that, and basically that was it. Like, no cousins, uncles, school parties, uh, childhood friends, traditions, civic life. Like, it was a complete abandonment of, you know, Western civil life, civil as in, you know, citizen citizen life, like as a citizen of a country, um, or even of a city or of a region in that country. There was just none of that at all. um, and so yeah, like I think that can work for someone who quite literally just loves, you know, spending their time maybe sunbathing, or just trying out restaurants, or just, you know, I don't know, looking into the horizon for the whole day, but without any sort of attachment or past, like attachment to the past, attachment to the future, love of routine, and like feeling that there's an ongoing sort of um, you know, roots that you're building and like that you're growing from. And this is where I want to take this to the politics of it, because fundamentally, you know, to me, this has to do with like, this isn't just something that happened to me and that I could just choose to escape. This isn't just something that happened in a vacuum because some people had this idea that they wanted to live this life, which they did. And honestly, like, I'm not saying nobody can ever like this. Again, there are people, like, if that's their goal in life and they have like no other aspirations or like needs and like emotional desires, then I guess that can be it for them. But I think this is much more sinister than like just some random decision. And like, I could say the same for, I mean, obviously this is a much more unforgivable situation, but like, I think they're called the Turpin family. You know, this family in the US that basically was completely isolated. They had a lot of kids. They lived on their own in the middle of nowhere, and they those kids were basically like, I think, malnourished and like not washed, and they knew absolutely nothing about the world that they lived in, because they basically didn't live in it. Um, and nobody knew for years and years and years, and like, the fact that nobody knew, to me, just like speaks of our political context. And same for, I don't know, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, you know, like, how could nobody know? Because like, those doctors that were treating this girl, they kept changing. They kept fucking changing. And like, when there is no stable place, when there is no place, this is the shit that can happen, you know? Like, it can get extremely dark if you're in the, not just in hands that are maybe not the ones I would have wanted, not gonna lie, but like in hands that are criminal, you know, like in the case of Gypsy, like it can get that dark. And so why does this happen? So basically, to me, this is, yes, the embodiment of a society that is fundamentally seeing people increasingly, and especially since the end of history, if you will, so the early 90s, a society that has seen people abandon um, civil life. Basically, there are no the associations that like used to see, you know, the working class gathered have been completely, not completely, but like drastically emptied out, be that unions, but also, you know, religion, also communities where families would exist. Any of those have fundamentally been lost, including political parties. Like, you know, the fact that you can so easily join and then leave an organization, and that they like blow up in this like sudden like, you know, race to the top, like Podemos, for instance, and then crumble like in such a quick and dramatic way. Like, that doesn't make for any sort of stability or solid ground. Um, and to me, you know, what results from that is a social situation which is very much like retirement, you know, which is kind of exactly what happens politically. Like, it's as if we have retired, you know, like we are just like retirees in our balconies, just like, yeah, gazing at the horizon, seeing nothing there, and barely feeling sorry for it because we have descended into complete nihilism. Um, and that is, at its core, postmodern, you know, and that is where we find ourselves. And I think this is the fucking, sorry, YouTube. I think this is the death of the left. Like, I think we are signing our own, you know, contract to die. And I'm not surprised things have not been going great for us, because we are kind of accepting this when we adopt positions like, you know, anti-politics, basically, you know, just acting like we have to drain the swamp, and like in doing that, yes, we are denouncing the current you know, duopolies, for instance, like in the US, or even in Spain, to be honest, at some points. But like, we are also kind of, you know, adopting the assumption that then power inherently is corrupting. And yeah, I'm not gonna go into that now, but fundamentally, when we only focus on, you know, the corruption of those in power, that often does turn against ourselves as well. When we have no more argument than that, and when we have no class-based argument, and no class organization, fundamentally. And so, in terms of this, in terms of, you know, living on a boat, how's that related? Like growing up on a ship, like how's that related to the current political situation and where we find ourselves? So I want to mention Ghosts of My Life, a book by Mark Fisher. And I want to cite something he says in the beginning of the book, where he starts by analyzing British TV show Sapphire and Steel. He starts by citing one of the characters who says, "This is nowhere and it is forever." And he basically describes the cafe where the characters are as, and I quote, "some kind of capsule floating in deep space." And obviously, you might already have gathered that that's how I felt about how I grew up. But I want to add to that what Fisher is, then going on to describe, which is a halfway place, right? And I'm gonna cite what he says. He says, "A prototype version of what the anthropologist Marc Auger will call in a 1995 book of the same title, non-places. The generic zones of transit, retails, parks, airports, which will come to increasingly dominate the spaces of late capitalism." So, cloned, generic monoliths, right? And this concept of non-places, to me, is just so true to that experience I had, because what a cruise ship is ultimately a non-place, right? I think obviously not all of them, and like increasingly so, like they used to look much better. They used to be much more appealing and interesting. Like now I do feel they've turned into non-places. And again, like, I'm not saying this is a horrible place for everyone. I'm saying not for me. Like, not for me. And also, I mean, hey, maybe yes for me for a day, but like where they fit, where their current form especially fits, is within that non-place filled system, which includes not only cruise ships, but like shopping centers, for instance, airports, most certainly, train stations, all of these places that are generic, that are filled with ads, and shops that are chains that basically make you like the combination of all of this makes you feel like this place could be in London, but it could also be in Madrid, or it could be in Milan, or it could be in New York. Basically, it is a non-place because it's not really connected to any particular actual place. It doesn't have a character of its own. It's just fundamentally generic, and it's there to sell you something. It's there to sell. It's not about quality. It's not about historical connections. It's not about a project for the future. It's not about a shared story or something like, a tradition, which might be sort of like Time's version of a home. So something that is a shared experience where you feel like you are tethered to, where there's an actual connection, and that, is not just connected to you tonight, a good night we're gonna have, but it's connected to you in terms of your past and your ancestry's past, and also your future. So the future of the people that you are fighting for, whether those are your own children or the people who surround you that you want to see grow and that are, you know, in a way, your legacy. And the world is full of non-places now, you guys, and that I find incredibly depressing because they're not for me. Again, they're not for me. I also want to recommend a show, probably my favorite TV show, to be honest. I adore it. When I watched it, I just thought, oh my god, this is me. And I think, you know, shows that any like cultural product that is able to do that, I think there's a humanism to it that just is unforgettable, and I think it really says a lot about its quality. And I want to read a quote from it, and I want you guys to see how connected it is to what I've just described in terms of non-places. I love this. So, not quite a room, Jivan, one of the main characters, thought now, looking around the stage. It was too transitory, all those doorways and dark spaces between wings, the missing ceiling. It was more like a terminal, he thought, a train station or an airport. Everyone passing quickly through. And yes, obviously, can relate, but what is this talking about? So basically, in this amazing show, which you have to watch, Jivan, this character, finds himself as a spectator to fundamentally the apocalypse. And the show tells his story along with multiple other characters, especially two, which are Arthur, this incredibly charismatic man who just like cannot help but be loved by everyone he meets. He's a very established actor. He's at the moment that this scene happens, which is also the moment of his death, he's acting in a Shakespeare play. And then the other main character is a little girl who loves this guy, and she is one of the child actors in his play. And what happens is, and the reason that I think this is the most romantic story I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, basically, this guy dies on that night, on this scene, which is why Jivan, at this moment, is on the stage and trying to help him out, trying to figure out what's happening to the guy. He's having a heart attack. And basically, this guy dies, and the night he dies is the night that the apocalypse basically ushers in by a pandemic. So there's a global pandemic that kills so much of humanity that basically all of our, civilization gets completely undermined to the point where institutions just straight up fail. Like, there are no more institutions after this, and we, like, the people, we see, really identify with that. Like, the people that are left with only survival. And the show also tells us survival is not enough, because then they go on to still perform Shakespeare. I love that. And also we see Hamlet sort of play out in these characters' lives. This little girl is I think another thing that I love is that it's because it's such a humanist piece. I feel like every character from the show is every character from Hamlet in a way, but this little girl is, to me, very much Ophelia. But basically, yeah, she's left in the shadow of this brilliant, charismatic man who with his death, basically brings forth the end of the world. And she's left in his ruins, in his wreckage. And what this wreckage looks like is a non-place. It is a non-place. And, you know, one of the biggest sort of spots where a part of the story takes place is an airport. Which some of the characters in the play sort of remodel. Actually, the ruling characters in the play, not in the play, sorry, in the TV show, actually remodel, and that's where they sort of quote unquote govern from, in a way. And you know, they have this, you know, museum of civilization, but it is no longer civilization, and you know, it's a non-place. It literally is. I encourage everyone to watch and confirm that. And to me, that experience of that little girl, you know, who finds herself in these non-places, that's what I went through. And the point is not just me, it's where we are. And Station 11 is, the title recalls a station that this also fictional character that appears in the show. This character is basically an astronaut, right? And so he is out there in space, and he stops at Station 11, but he's basically in a spaceship, just as I was in a ship. And this guy is also at points meant to be this little girl, as we can see in a lot of frames from this show. And so basically, to me, this amazing show just really reflects the end of history. So 1990 up until now, because like, as the Bungacast guys say, I absolutely love them. They do say, you know, like, the end of history is over, but history isn't really back yet. And I feel like that's where we are now. But I do believe, yes, there was some sort of, you know, end of history that played out for a while, and now we're looking how to get back to actual history. And turns out it's not going well, or at least not super easy to do. But yeah, I mean, I just fully recommend this. I think it really illustrates what I'm trying to convey here. And I also want to bring up something that yesterday, while I was watching a Catherine Liu, another one of my favorites, lecture at Georgetown, I want to bring up something she said. So I'm going to repeat her words. In 1992, The Lancet did a series of studies about Palestinian children who had survived the violence of the first Intifada. And they found that they did not react according to a trauma script because they had a narrative about violence and survivorship that had to do with a national mission. The conclusion being, she says, she reports actually, that when you have a people who are socially integrated into a narrative where their suffering has meaning, there's less PTSD symptoms. I love this. I, want to say precisely because this video isn't about, oh God, my trauma. This is exactly the point. It's not about me randomly having this, oh God, this experience. Yeah, just me, myself and I, and me, myself and my random ship. It's most definitely not just about that. It is about the context that we find ourselves in. We are so obsessed with our own individual trauma. We're not realizing the way, ironically, to actually have less of the symptoms that define it. The way would be to actually have more, to be more socially integrated into structures that are, or narratives that actually have a past, a future, an epic sense to them that puts us together with other people who are suffering through the same fate of having to sell our labor to basically survive. Because that's the tragedy. We are living, most of us are living to survive. Even if you are a capitalist and you got the best of it, you are still compelled, you still have the compulsion to make more and more and more money because you don't want to descend into the working class, and that's how it works. Fundamentally, we are all undermined as human beings to not be our full human selves and feel self-actualized and realized in the world. And so fundamentally trauma and what Catherine Liu was saying is this trauma culture that we are trapped in, and that the professional managerial class wants us in, is very much all about a direction which is that of personal trauma that doesn't take into account the actual suffering of the workers as workers in relation to being alienated from their labor and giving our best hours, days, months, years to a capitalist, or if you really hate that capitalist in particular, to the next one, right? And this, again, another thing I wanted to say is maybe having a national project is not such a bad idea. People are gonna hate me for this, but I mean, can we just take a minute to maybe evaluate our position on that? And our position on shared events, such as maybe traditions that mark a place in time that is shared by everyone, because now we don't even have little places in times that are shared by everyone. I don't know, when an episode from Friends used to air, when they came out, everyone was watching. Now, I mean, thank God for the White Lotus, because it came out in week per week, and we all were watching together. I loved that experience, and normally that's not it. You just binge a whole BS show. Normally people watch stuff years even, or months after it's come out. It's not so much a thing on television that you are forced, quote unquote, forced to watch as it comes out. It's something that you can, just go back and watch whenever, binge it. I'd rather binge it. People say this. I just, again, not a fan. Another thing that I want to bring up is something that I saw that really was one of the points that I realized, wow, my upbringing has not been normal. And that would be Victoria Spratt. She's a housing expert in the UK. Quite insightful, and in an interview for Bristol Ideas, she tells the story of a mom and her daughter who became homeless, and they were moved by social services from Peckham to Croydon in London. And she says this was basically unworkable for them because, they lost their entire community in terms of the people they knew, the family they had, the school, the doctor, all of that. And I was like, Holy shit. Like, obviously, I dare not say I had it as bad as a literal homeless child, not at all. I will say, though, I never had such a thing as like an area that I was at home in. Like, it was just, and this is what happens sometimes with the professional managerial class, precisely, that they don't need to count on public services, and they basically are just completely isolated in their own little world because they go completely private, and so they just move around. They just have that ability to displace, which is so important for a professional managerial class career. And so, yeah, they end up basically just going around and completely shattering any sort of roots that a child would have formed anywhere, which, again, that child is supposed to also be in the professional managerial class, and live to become an expert of some sort or a professional of some sort, and basically that's supposed to not matter to them. Completely sentimentally deprived life, in my opinion. Very sad, but probably materially better than this little girl in the UK. And, well, I'm coming to an end of this, guys. I will be leaving all of these references in the description so you can check them out. Please do. I hope this was some sort of a catalog for you guys to, like, if you're interested in this topic, for you guys to check the sources and be more informed and see kind of where I get my own political nourishing from, and how I form my ideas, where I'm coming from, and how my life shaped my understanding of our current economy and economic organization, and the world that it produces. And yeah, like I said, this isn't meant to be a, oh god, my trauma. It's meant to be, oh well, my trauma seems to be very connected to the context that we're in. The point being, it's just an incredibly transparent and quite extreme embodiment of the postmodern non-place context that we find ourselves in. To me, yeah, it just encapsulates it in such an incredibly precise, painfully precise way. And just as I do not like that system, it very much saddens me that this was my experience, and that I got put into a situation that just wasn't for me. But yeah, if you guys were curious, this is how I grew up. If you guys were curious, this is where a lot of my politics is coming from, and why I find it funny that I'm kind of such an example of everything that I criticize and that I hate, honestly, about our current situation. Hence why I want a different one. Hence why I'm a Marxist, I am a socialist, and I do want a world that is about togetherness, a shared narrative, and how we can actually, ironically, be more ourselves and more free in a world that is organized, democratically, where we get to own our own time and not have it quite literally stolen on the daily. I want to end by reading this amazing quote from Sam Chris's article in Damage magazine, one of my absolute favorites, where they basically talk about the Odyssey and, you know, what would the Odyssey think about us in our current society. And I find that extremely interesting because I love the Odyssey. I love, you know, the meanings that we can draw from it. I feel very understood by it, obviously, and I feel like I am struggling towards my dry land like Odysseus. Believe me, I cannot wait to get to my Ithaca, wherever that is. I can't really relate to a lot of the characters because, again, extremely humanist material there. But I do relate a lot to Odysseus and, Ulysses. And, or how, like, depending on how you choose to call him. But, yeah, I find it extremely precious and extremely telling, again, because it is a humanist text, how much it gets right about our time, about right now. And so, yeah, just to end, I want to read what they say about it in Damage. We're now on the open sea, far away from the agonisms of the polis, lonely and wandering, untethered to any social whole. You sail the sea as rovers, with your hands against every man and every man's hand against you. Odysseus doesn't angrily insist on his individuality. He's been condemned to it. Odysseus is the figure of the human subject under neoliberalism. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please subscribe to support me. Please like the video if you did. And I hope to have many more discussions with you. Goodbye.